Hello. Second off, a quick intro. I'm Karlin Curtis. As Mary said, I was one of the founding engineers at Incident.io. We're an incident management platform. We're kind of everywhere today, which is kind of exciting. But if you're interested, obviously come and chat to me after the talk or anyone else on the booth out there. So I've spent the last couple of years working primarily on our catalog. And through that time, I've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of customers about their experiences building and maintaining their own catalogs. Catalogs promise a lot of things. So at my previous role at a company called GoCardless, we implemented a service catalog. And honestly, it wasn't a great experience. We spent a huge amount of effort on it. And at the end, we thought we had something that was OK, but it just didn't feel like value for money for the amount of time and energy that we'd put in. Pretty much everyone agrees that service catalogs are useful. So when we started talking to customers, I was waiting to find out not just all the amazing things that they'd done with it, but how we'd gone so badly wrong. And don't get me wrong, I did hear some amazing stories. But I also heard the same things over and over again, which started to feel hauntingly familiar. It took us forever to build. It's not quite ready yet, but it's nearly there. And I'm not really sure if the data's even right anymore. And almost everybody said, we'd love to see more people using it. And so I started to wonder if maybe my experience hadn't been so unusual after all. And maybe we could do better. So today we're going to walk through quickly why you might build a catalog, what makes it difficult, and then maybe how we can do it better. So at Incident, we talk about catalog as a connected map of everything in your organization. When we were building ours, we joked about using the tagline, connecting everything everywhere all at once, and then we didn't use it because we did not want to be sued, but I still think it's probably a pretty good articulation of what we're trying to say. Really, it's a database. It might store services, teams, infra, lists of things, connections to other things. Simple, right? Maybe you can use your catalog to decide who to page when something goes wrong. Or just to give you a bird's eye view of a service and see relevant pipelines, GitHub pull requests, whatever matters to your organization. Maybe it's about avoiding the pre-audit scramble, so you're collecting that information through the year, rather than having a hellish month preparing when they arrive. So that all sounds great. Why is it hard? So to explain this, I'm going to tell a story, which is actually a collection of stories from those conversations I was talking about earlier. This is what implementing a catalog feels like and how it can go a bit wrong. So our story starts with lofty ambitions and big ideas. You've gone to a tech conference, you've listened to someone like me yammer on about how great service catalogs are. So you go back, you talk to your managers, and you decide that a catalog is what you need to do next, and you put it onto your roadmap. So it's week one, and you start with your build versus buy, create a feature matrix, create a really great spreadsheet with 3,000 requirements, few opinions from a couple of key managers, and you decide that you should get set up nice and part. We're going to spend money and get hosted backstage. We can't talk forever. Let's get building. So you open your laptop on day one, and you go, hey, do we have a list of services? No, we don't have a list of services. So you start making a list. And then you have a bright idea that you can look at your Kubernetes clusters and look at the list of pods. That's a list of services, right? The names are not as inspiring as you had hoped. And ultimately, you discover that you're taking on a big information gathering exercise, and you're going to need input from across your organization. So it's week 4. You go to your monthly tech lead meeting, and you present the plan for building out the catalog. You ask everybody to take a look at the list of pods and map them to services or features, maybe answer a couple of questions about them, and add anything that might be missing. This still seems kind of fine. So you've had responses from some of your tech leads, but you've also discovered that this just isn't a priority for many of them. They've got incidents to handle, shipping deadlines to meet, angry customers breathing down their neck. This isn't something they're going to be assessed on. It's not something that they've been told they're going to be held accountable for. And they're right. This shouldn't be their priority. They're not crying out for a catalog. They don't really know what value it is that you're trying to deliver. And you don't have the authority or the social capital to change their mind. You end up spending your days chasing these busiest people in your organization. and burning all your social capital in the process. And as you're chasing the rest of the org, people meaningfully engage with what you're trying to do for the first time. And you discover that some of the assumptions that you made in that early phase weren't quite right. By now, you're spending all of your emotional energy, all of your social capital, persuading people that what you're doing is valuable. And so in order to do that, you start to engage with the way in which you're doing it. Maybe you have the great Jason versus YAML argument. Or maybe you're arguing about more important things like what data you want to be collecting or how that data should be stored so that it's genuinely easy for teams to manage their own things. You're going to need to change your approach based on the feedback that you're getting. You know it's for the best, but it also means, you know all that chasing that you just did? Well, it's back. And so you find yourself going back through all of the people who'd already filled in the form, many of whom are really, really sick of you at this point, asking for more information, more chasing. And you keep going, and you keep going. And then you have a last few holdouts, so you start escalating to managers. And one of the real problems here is that this means that people's first interaction with the catalog is a really, really negative one. They are being forced to spend time away from what they think should be their top priority to fill in a form. And fundamentally, filling in a form is boring. And it doesn't deliver immediate value to their team. You have a major security incident. It's a near miss, luckily, but word comes down that correctly there's a new P1 project in town. The catalog just has to wait. So you redirect all your efforts to make sure that this isn't something that can happen again. See you in a couple of months. And so we're back. You go to a company meeting where someone's talking about the MVP of a new fraud detection service, and you look at your catalog and you go, well, that's not represented here. They haven't kept it up to date, but why would they have? How many other things have changed since we started gathering that data? Because if we're in a high-performing, fast-moving engineering organization, 2 months is a long time. You decide that it just doesn't matter. You need to launch this thing and get it out into the world so that you can start building features that use that data and also get out of the never-ending death spiral of data collection and chasing and data collection and chasing. So you turn up one bright Monday morning and you announce in Slack, we've launched the catalog. And you look around and no one else seems to care all that much, but you know, it's a big day for the team and maybe you go out for some beers to celebrate. And you run a demo with the whole of engineering and everyone nods and says, oh, that's neat. And if you're really lucky, they all visit it at the same time and it goes down, which is what happened to us. But you tap yourselves on the back for a job well done. And then everyone goes back to their day-to-day as if nothing's really happened. Over the next 6 months, your team continues to try and find different things to build using our new catalog toy. And you run an internal survey 6 months later, asking people in engineering how often they use the catalog, what they find most useful. And the response is underwhelming. Some of the data's not quite right. The service dependency graph is quite cool. I don't really use it that much, to be honest. And when you reflect on a team, you conclude, along with all those other people that I'd spoken to, we'd love to see more people using it. So, what went wrong? We've ended up with 3 big problems. We don't really remember why we built it. We didn't ever have buy-in from the org. And the data isn't staying up to date. So what can we learn here? We had unclear objectives at the start. Remember that laundry list of things that the catalog was going to do? Having so many different objectives makes it really difficult to deliver value on any single one of them. Your focus is constantly split, trying to make a catalog that is all things to all people. It's an easy mistake to make. When you wrote your business case to build a catalog, just one of these problems would not have justified the level of effort that you wanted to put in. It's the very fact that it can solve so many problems that it becomes an attractive proposition. But when we start building a catalog, we seem to forget everything that we all know about how to build products. To build a good product, you need to be focused on the problem, not the solution. Otherwise, you're running around with a hammer looking for a nail. But with a catalog, the problem is so multifaceted that instead, all of our focus goes on the solution. How are we going to get all this data that we don't have? What tool are we going to put it in? Are we going to store it as JSON or as YAML? And just like building any other product, we want to deliver value incrementally, focusing on the first minimal valuable product that we can get to our customers, in this case, the teams in our organization. What's the first thing that would add value to somebody? How fast can I get there? And then we do that again and again and again, shipping incrementally. And we all know this. We all do this in our day-to-day. We also know that sometimes the first thing that you build on that journey might not look like the end product at all. For us, maybe that is putting things into a Notion database. Maybe it's reorganizing your infrastructure repo, so everything related to one thing is in a single file. Whatever it is, those projects are not failures. They're incremental steps on your way to having a great catalog. So on to problem 2. This thing about buy-in or social capital. You'll remember in our story, we spent a lot of time chasing people from around the organization. And that process used up our social capital and left people everywhere feeling bored, grumpy, or just confused. We were asking people to take time out of their busy schedules to fill in our form, and then we had to go back and get them to fill in a second form, maybe even a third.
And if you're enjoying this, LeadDev has a ton more to offer.
I'm quite fond of the articles.
I feel like LeadDev blogs are my favorite, and it's been really, really useful to kind of create these more meaningful connections as well.
If there's something you're struggling with as an engineering leader, there's a pretty good chance that LeadDev has published something that addresses it.
So make sure you check out leaddev.com.
And remember that we didn't deliver any value back to those people for nearly 5 months. Once again, if we focus on incremental value, we can do much better here. We can deliver in tight feedback loops, giving people instant value for the data that they provide. And the other trap that we fell into was to prioritize breadth over depth. When you're making a list and checking it twice, it's really easy to become fixated on finishing the list. Finishing the list is really satisfying. We are engineers, we like things to be just right. And it feels great to have it all written down, but we really risk falling foul of the 80-20 rule. Because actually, there's not that much value in us having a list of that long tail of services that nobody uses or cares about. The reason that as an institution we don't care about them is often because they don't matter. And if they do matter, we can deal with that problem then. Gathering that data, that's the thing that was so time-consuming. And that's the thing that took all of our social capital. So instead of trying to provide a thin layer of value across the whole of the org, we can instead just focus on a single team. It makes our first project much more achievable. We don't have to do something order of magnitude 300 services or 3,000. We can do it for like 10. We can choose a team that has a bit more space in their roadmap. Maybe a team that we already have social connections with. We're co-located in the same office. We know that they're good to work with and they're interested in these kind of problems. We can iterate quickly on their feedback. It's like having the best customers possible. They're sat next to you. And once we've got something that feels good, then we can go out to the rest of the org. It's really clear what they're going to get by plugging into whatever it is that we've built. We've got much more validation that it's actively useful. And the cycle time of people giving us data and us getting them value becomes almost instant. And so we come to our final problem. The data decays. We find ourselves trapped in this negative cycle where the data isn't quite right, so I don't trust it, so I'm not going to use it for anything. So the catalog doesn't do anything for me, so I'm not going to spend time updating the data, so the data isn't right. When building a catalog, we have to remember, if we don't use the data, it's going to rot. We are fast-moving engineering organizations. Things change really quickly. It's just what we do. And so imagining that data is this static thing that will never change, it's just a fantasy. If the data isn't accurate, it's almost inevitable that we will fall into that negative spiral. So instead, we have to use it, because that's what will stop it going stale. And no, displaying the data on a web page does not count as using it. If your catalog contains data about which services are deployed in which clusters, it should decide which services are deployed in which clusters. If it stores which teams owns which services, it should decide who gets paged when there's an alert on one of those services. And trust me, if somebody is woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning for the wrong service, they will fix that data, and they will fix it really fast. Well, as long as they can fix it. If somebody can't change the data easily or safely, the data will inevitably rot. The last thing you want as a team is to become the gatekeepers of the data, receiving endless requests to make small, annoying changes, which will eventually dry up as people stop bothering because there's just too much friction in the process. So everybody needs to know where the data is, which sounds stupid, but is really easy to get wrong. And they also need to be able to change it. It's one of the advantages of using a catalog for your routing layer, rather than a set of complex routing rules, maybe as code or in a rules engine. It's just data. This person owns this thing. When you get this wrong, us engineers, we are a great bunch of problem solvers. And do you know what we'll do? We'll just find a way around it. We'll write some exception into some alerting tool software. We'll create an entirely spurious team that doesn't even exist so that we can route things through that. Whatever we need to do to make sure that we don't get woken up, we will. But it won't involve making your catalog data better. So let's recap our takeaways. First off, we realized that clarity is key. With so many objectives floating around, it's really easy to lose sight of the value that we're trying to provide. Start small with a single team. Deliver quick wins and preserve your social capital. Prioritize depth over breadth. It's better to have one team love you than have everyone just about remember that you exist. Collect data which you can use, and then continue to use it so that it doesn't rot. And make it easy for everybody to update that source of truth to keep your data fresh. So I gave this talk at SRECon last week in Dublin, which is great if you've not been. And I had a load of really good chats with people afterwards. And many were worried that they were either about to or had already embarked on this same path of data collection and chasing. And they asked me, sort of off the record in practical terms, what would I actually do in their position? And it got me thinking, what if we're just thinking about this whole problem upside down? Because what I actually said was, well, I wouldn't be building a catalog at all. I'd start by building a great way of routing alerts, and then I'd let the catalog appear as a side effect of another project. The catalog is not the goal. The goal is all that other stuff we started with: alert routing, infrastructure automation, engineering onboarding. So why is the thing in our roadmap catalog? What would happen if we just focused on solving those other problems, knowing that a catalog was almost certainly going to be a major part of our solution? Once we've done 2 or 3 of those, we can start to coalesce the data that we've collected into something that's a bit more formally a catalog instead of just some YAML files. Because ultimately, that's all a catalog really is. It's just data. And once we've got the data, then we can use it for more and more stuff. And so at Incident, without really thinking about it, that's how we built out our catalog. Now, don't get me wrong, we are in easy mode. We are small, we are agile, we don't have 20 years of legacy services that we don't know what they do. You know, there are a lot of things that made building a catalog at Incident significantly easier than it would be at many of the organizations that you folks work in today. But I still think that this approach can scale. So we started with a list of engineers or people and tags, and we used that to define what access they would get to our production infrastructure or our data. Basically, everybody has something like this, and it's stored somewhere. Then we started to introduce teams. Now, the reason for this was that we wanted to have a Google group so that we could invite people to all of the rituals for a team, whether that's stand-ups, retros, product retrospectives. And that was kind of easy to just do as code, too. So now we've got some configuration of not just which organization someone's in, but actually which team they're in and maybe even what their role is. This can be incremental. There's no reason that we have to do all our teams at once. We started with just our product teams, and now, this same file has data and infrastructure and all the other teams in our organization. We wanted to be able to route errors from our code base to different teams, depending on who owned the package. So we started creating these little module files in our code base. So we're a Go code base and one of these in each package, basically. And we started using this to route our alerts. We wanted to build an internal status page to help our customer success and support teams understand whether there were incidents that were affecting particular parts of the platform. So we added features and feature areas so that we could communicate it in a way that was easy to understand. We wanted to be able to tag our incidents with customers so that we could tag the right account manager at an incident that happened to affect that person. Particularly if we had prospects who were trialing the platform, it's really important not just that we provide great customer support to them, but that everyone else involved in the deal is aware of what's happening. And so we landed on a catalog that looks like this, which is the core of what we use today. And I think there are two really interesting parts about this. Number one, we never had a project build a catalog. We developed this iteratively through solving other business problems. We never had to justify why a catalog was useful. We never had to go and ask all the tech leads to fill in a form, because we built it up piece by piece. And the second thing is that we never drew that diagram. It emerged over time as we needed it. And that means we have pretty high conviction that that's the right shape for our organization, because every piece of that diagram we built to solve a particular problem. Now, in fact, this is pretty much the diagram that I would now go onto a sales call and recommend somebody to use. But we only figured that out by just trying things, because often in engineering, that's the best way. Let your catalog emerge as a side effect of other projects that you're running that each individually deliver value to your engineering org. I'd also recommend, and I obviously would say this, but incidents are a really good place to start, just because there are some problems where you absolutely need a catalog. Like, the most important reason for being able to map your services to your teams is so that you can page the right people when things go wrong. And that means that you're going to have instant value. And in fact, it means most people have a catalog of some description already, because you probably have a solution to this problem. And maybe it's just about taking that complex set of routing rules and just reorganizing them into something that is a bit more catalog-shaped of data. In order to do this, there are a few things that we need to do to make sure that it actually happens. We need to encourage our teams to take a little bit of extra time when they are solving these problems to prepare the data and make sure that it's in an accessible state. That's the difference between our complex rules engine and just our data that's in a YAML file. We need to get really good at identifying a catalog-shaped problem. If we want this catalog to become the kind of center of gravity, we do that by continually using it to solve different business problems that we have. And we need to continue to deliver incremental value to the rest of the org, solving one problem at a time, just like when we're building products. So if you have any questions about catalogs, incidents, on-call, engineering, I'm around today and a little bit tomorrow morning, or you can obviously chat to other Incident.io folks if you have questions about that. Thanks so much for listening, and I'm going to be around this afternoon for any questions.